Hi there, today I have a project for you using a technique called Emboss Resist. To get started, we're going to use old olive cardstock, and this is your standard card size. That's 8.5 by 5.5, and it's scored down the middle at 4 1/4. We're going to use the hardwood stamp to create the background for the card. For the larger stamps like this, I like to leave it on the table. We're going to use old olive ink and pat the ink all across the stamp. We're going to take the folded cardstock and hold it just above the stamp to line it up, and then set it down. We're going to use a piece of scrap paper to cover that, and you're going to hold with one hand while you rub the paper onto the stamp with your other hand. And make sure you get all the edges so you have a nice transfer of ink to the cardstock. You're going to peel back your copy paper, hold the cardstock down, and then lift this up. If this didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, it could become the back of your card, and you could just turn this over and repeat that process. We're going to use a stamp set called Seasonally Scattered, and the thanks image here. Now I've already stamped this image in Versamark and embossed it with white embossing powder. Clear embossing powder would also work. I have a hard time stamping this image straight, so I actually stamp it on a larger piece of white cardstock and then I trim it down. This is cut down to about 2 1/8 by 4 3/8. So now that the image is embossed, we're going to add some color using sponge daubers and inks. We're going to start with rich raspberry ink, and this is a pretty dark purple, so you want to have a lighter touch with this color. The sponge dauber fits right on the end of your fingertip, but if you want, you could also hold it that way. And you're going to pat it onto the ink pad. I like to tap off on the scratch paper just to make sure the ink isn't too dark. And you want to go in a soft circular motion, and I like to start on top of the embossed image. You don't want to put the dauber down and then start sponging, because you'll end up with a circle that's very hard to blend. So you want to start that circular motion even before the dauber hits the paper to give you a nice soft blending. So start in one area and just go in a circular motion, and I'm barely pressing on the cardstock. So just a very light touch will give you a nice application of color. And I like to do probably about 3 little areas of color before I go to the next one. Now some of this ink is going to sit on top of the embossed image, and we'll clean that off when we're done. We're going to use pumpkin pie ink next. And again, just pat to get some ink on the dauber. Make sure it's not too dark first. And you're going to overlap the colors a little bit, but not too much. So just start in that circular motion. We're going to use old olive ink next. Our last color is crushed curry. Now when you're sponging across the letters, make sure that you get into those little crevices so those letters pop and it's easier to read the sentiment. Now after you get the first application of color on, this is where you can look at it and decide if you want to add more ink. So I'm going to go back to the pumpkin pie and also old olive. Now even though that raspberry is a nice dark color, it still needs a little bit more blending, so I'm just going to touch this up a little bit. Okay, so now you want to take a clean tissue and just kind of buff it to remove any ink that is sitting on top of that embossed image. So we're going to layer this to Whisper White cardstock. that is cut just slightly larger. This measures 4.5 by 2 1/4. It's about 1/8 inch wider, so it'll give just a little pop of white around the edges. So be pretty generous with your adhesive. And when you're layering this, you want to hold this up and you're checking 3 out of the 4 sides to see that they're even. And I'm not going to press it down until I lightly lay it down to make sure that that looks pretty good. I've already stamped 3 of these little banners in rich raspberry, pumpkin pie, and crushed curry on the same colored cardstock. And this is from a stamp set called Choose Happiness. There's actually a banners framelit that will cut that out, but it's easy to cut with your scissors too. Now I can't find my bone folder to slightly curl these edges, so I'm just going to use my fingers just to give it a little bit of a curl on those points. I'm going to add adhesive to the back, and I'm going to layer these to the right side of the card. And you can vary the length. They don't have to be at the same evenness, so just kind of change that up a little bit. And then this one can overlap. We're going to add dimensionals to the back of this embossed piece. Now this is pretty centered left to right, but a little bit closer to the top of the card. We're going to use a new stamp set called Fall Fest to decorate the inside of the card and the envelopes. This is a photopolymer set, and they come on these little sheets. You just peel this back and take your stamp off and you're good to go. A nice thing about these photopolymer stamps is you can see exactly where you're stamping. The not so nice thing, in my opinion, is that it's so much easier to get ink on the acrylic block. So you really want to just try to tap tap and avoid mash mash, and then just press, and do not rock this acrylic block or you're going to get that ink on there, and lift up. We'll do the inside too. I'm going to add adhesive around the edges. And I'm actually a little lighter with the adhesive for the inside piece because a lot of my friends that I send cards to, they like to recycle them. And if I don't put too much adhesive, it's easier for them to tug it out and put a new inside and then send it on to someone else. Now I want to give you another option for this center panel. I had a customer who had a mistake on her card and it wasn't one that was going to be easy to cover up. And so what we decided to do was take these leaf images that we stamped on the inside and the envelope and stamp them on top of the same color ink. So this leaf we're going to ink up in Old Olive, and we're only going to stamp it on top of the Old Olive here. We're going to repeat that with all the other colors. This one is crushed curry, so we're only stamping on the crushed curry. And then we have pumpkin pie. And the last one is rich raspberry. Now because we've stamped on top of this embossed image, we still have to remove that excess ink, and just make sure that you're using a clean, dry tissue. So here's the original card that we did, and if I take this panel where we've stamped the leaves for a busier background, you'll get an idea of the look that will give you. I hope you enjoyed today's project. For more ideas, you can visit me at KeenanCreations.com. Thanks and have a great day.